Thanks very much, Doris, and it's really a great pleasure to be here at TU Delft and for IWA to be associated with this very important summit. I wanted to start my talk by presenting a dichotomy or a contradiction. As has been mentioned, we know that water exists as a priority in many agendas. We're aware of the SDGs and the dedicated goal for water and sanitation. And SDG 6 actually deals with water and sanitation in a fairly comprehensive manner. It talks about water use efficiency, integrated water resource management, and wastewater management. When we think of climate change, we often say that water is the medium through which we feel the effects of climate change. As they say, the climate crisis is a water crisis, and it's the water sector that's the primary victim in bearing these impacts. The IPCC recent reports clearly finds that climate change is intensifying the water cycle, and this is bringing on more intense rainfall and associated flooding and more intense droughts. So water has now become very big on the climate agenda. And then, when we look at the Global Risk Report published by the World Economic Forum, water risk was recognized for nearly 9 years as one of the top 5 risks to the global economy, although it's dropped down in the last 2 years because of the pandemic. So clearly the private sector recognizes the importance of water. Historic droughts, more pronounced extreme weather, escalating water competition. All of these things make water a material financial risk. But here's the dichotomy. Why is water not a higher priority? With all this attention and all this importance on water through these agendas, why is it not happening? But the thing is, it is happening, but not in the right sequence. There's always a very swift and vocal response when we have a disaster. You see it now with floods and droughts. As Harold Macmillan once said, it's events, my dear boy, it's events. So what we need to do as a sector is we need to reverse the sequence. Reverse the sequence so that political interest and motivation leads to prevention and cure, and not, as is currently the case, to rescue and recovery, which is always more expensive and doesn't give you a decent political platform. You see, good water is good politics. If you get your water policy right, you get re-elected. And this is what Lee Kuan Yew did in Singapore, and this is what you're seeing Modi trying to do in India at the moment. With business, they clearly recognize the importance of water security. But the big problem is that public service instruments are struggling to give us water security, both in terms of quality and quantity. So what do we need to do? We need to better articulate the value of water, its many dimensions, coupled with a strong evidence base of the magnitude of its true value. You see, water is the journey. It's not the destination. It's a journey to a wonderful place, a place where people are healthy, productive, and live in beautiful spaces, and live in harmony with nature. Water is the journey to happiness and well-being. So as a sector, we need to better communicate the true value of water. And to do so, we need policy instruments that can better articulate its great value. And if we do this well, we can stimulate interest and investments. We need to think about it like this. It's not that I need money for water, but that I can take money out of water. And now is the time to reverse this sequence. The Build Back Better initiatives with their associated economic stimulus packages is a good vehicle for us in the global south to hitch our wagon to. We see many initiatives from the World Bank, from the African Development Bank, from the European Union. In the global south, the task is not so much building back better, but simply to build better, as we're often starting from scratch. But as a sector, we need to be opportunistic and capitalize on these topical agendas. The climate agenda is a big policy target, and the post-pandemic Build Back Better narrative is providing us with a great vehicle. So there is a big call to action, and we as a sector have to do some serious path shifting. You see, water was historically a building block of the high carbon economy. Now there's a real opportunity for it to be a building block of the low carbon economy. And the global south is the key. You see, adversity has a lot to do with this. It's the major part of the challenge. In the global north, we're fine-tuning systems because we already have universal access. But in the global south, we don't. And so there's this very interesting equation. On the one side, you have this huge need for new infrastructure and services that could be carbon intensive. But on the other side, you have this window of opportunity to do things differently. Energy neutral, efficient and productive use of water, where we maximize the capture value from our water and our waste streams. You know, the global south leapfrogged fixed wires of communication infrastructure, so they can also avoid the slow and costly mechanistic and heavy legacy of centralized water systems by moving to off-grid, distributed, flexible, and circular systems. So I see huge opportunities to raise water on all the agendas, not just the development agenda. Key to this is wastewater and sanitation, as it contributes to all agendas, and it is very critical for water security. You see, 80% of wastewater is not treated. And it's not just the usual suspects of the global south and sub-Saharan Africa. It's Central Asia, it's Latin America, it's Central Europe. And this leads to public health problems, environmental degradation, and damage to our water sources. And it infringes people's human rights. For example, in Dhaka, a city of nearly 15 million people that generates 2 million cubic meters of wastewater a day, only 2% is treated. And when we do try to do the right thing, we've done badly. This is a slide from an organization I used to work for, EMI, and this shows the number of wastewater treatment works in Ghana, different cities, different towns and cities in Ghana. And when I click, you see the number of systems that are actually working. I can show you similar graphs from many other countries. So if we were totally honest, we haven't done well. And we need to ask ourselves why, and learn from our mistakes. You see, the systems that we built in these countries were not well engineered for the local context. They had high CapEx and OpEx costs, and very low cost recovery rates. For example, a recent study by the European Investment Bank showed that 90% of developing country governments had no cost recovery efforts for water and sanitation. The lack of cost recovery means utilities tend to reduce costs where they can, and that is mainly in the area of maintenance. And this results in deteriorating treatment, shortened lifespans of the treatment systems, and then, as you see here, they fall into disuse. It's unacceptable when you think about how much money has been wasted. But attitudes are changing. In the global south, there's growing interest in wastewater as it's being viewed as a potential water source that can provide greater water security. And there is great anticipation that resource recovery and reuse will be the panacea, the cure that can potentially generate money to make wastewater and sanitation systems financially sustainable. And at IWA, we truly believe that the next 20 years will be the golden era for wastewater and sanitation. Many countries in the global south are on the cusp of investing large amounts of money to address this issue. For example, in India, they are spending $36 billion over the next 5 years to provide universal coverage of water supply and sanitation. 26 million water supply and sanitation connections. This is under the Rejuvenation Scheme, UMRUT 2.0. And you see, these countries in the global south, they have the advantage of being able to build upon the experiences of the global north. You see, in the global north, the last 70 years was like one big pilot study. We started with very large, clunky, concrete infrastructure. But over time, we've incrementally improved them. And so now we have more elegant and efficient solutions. Innovations that have changed the physics of our processes, such as granular sludge, anemox, thermal hydrolysis, mean that emerging economies can now design more efficient systems that have smaller footprints and have lower capex and opex costs. So countries in the global south are really in a strong position as they are embarking on their wastewater and sanitation journey, because the technologies are now converging. At IWA, we have been supporting many local companies in South Asia, for example, in tailoring new treatment systems to the local context, where circular economy is key and where both centralized and decentralized systems are on the table. So as I said, we really believe the next 20 years will be the golden age. And it's great to see that these innovations are being contextualized within the circular economy narrative. I was recently at the COP26, and the city commissioner from Surat stated that the city is earning $18 million a year from selling 115 megaliters of treated wastewater a day. When we look at cities like Chennai, they have one of the largest energy-neutral plants in India. A couple of months ago, I chaired an event to launch the World Bank's WISER initiative, and we had the minister from Senegal giving us concrete examples from Dakar, where wastewater is being reused by industry, by agriculture, and where biogas production is helping to run their plant. They sell around 3 megaliters per day of treated sewage to private companies and market gardeners. They also sell stabilized sludge for soil enhancement. Also at this meeting, we had Colombia presenting their new water policy that has circular economy at its center. So things are really moving in an exciting and wonderful way. We're also seeing great innovations taking place in the area of non-sewered sanitation. The Gates Foundation has been championing this, and the Graduate Sanitation School actually at IHE Delft and its many international partners from the Global South have been at the forefront in developing some of these key innovations. You see, these systems were traditionally poorly designed, unpleasant, smelly, unlicensed pit emptiers who contributed to environmental pollution. But now we've reframed the problem. We see it for what it is. It's a logistics problem where we have to move shit from A to B, either below ground or above ground. So let's think about it, how a logistics company like DHL might think about it. How can we move this shit in the most efficient and cost-effective way? This type of thinking is now resulting in the emergence of solutions that are clean, elegant, and cost-effective. And we're seeing resource recovery and reuse being hardwired into these systems. I have personally seen in a very short time the change in mindset. Senior decision makers who in the past were non-sewered sanitation deniers have now become champions of this type of approach because they see these solutions are being more professionally designed and the technology is sound and the systems are more elegant. The interesting thing about these decentralized approaches is they also give you an adaptive capacity. When you look at an urban area, when it urbanizes, the decision makers traditionally would build sewers, and they would have to anticipate growth and invest huge amounts of money. But with these decentralized systems, you can build them in modules, and you can grow them in a way that follows the trajectory of urban growth within your area. So your upfront costs are much lower, and you're not anticipating growth, but you're following that growth. We see a change in the way that we approach infrastructure. Traditionally, if you go to most countries in the global south, we were colonized, and the colonialists built a centralized sewer in the inner city, and there were no providers on the outskirts. And what we traditionally did was that we would think, When the urban area grows, can I extend my sewer? And we don't have money to do it, and when we do it, we don't have a treatment plant where the sewers can feed. But now you're seeing approaches where they're saying, what if we ring fence our centralized core, which has existed historically? And what if we start building decentralized units as the area urbanizes? So you're getting hybrid solutions that we never had before. However, there are still big challenges to recover costs with sanitation. So to make these systems cost-effective, we need to reduce costs. And this is where you're seeing the benefits of digital technology. We see septic tanks with sensors that communicate to call centers, who then initiate optimized routing algorithms for the pit emptiers. They're optimizing the logistics. In Kampala, they launched a GIS-based system that connects the pit emptiers with customers via call center. The pit emptiers submit critical data on the type of septic tanks, the volume collected, the nearest treatment station, through their app to the Kampala city. And this helps the city further optimize their collection and transport, because that is the major cost associated with these processes. In 2020, in Haiti, an NGO called Soil partnered with a company called TarrowWorks to develop mobile applications to optimize waste collection. They developed a software tool to optimize collection routes that reduce significantly the overall mileage covered during collection. So there's a lot of enthusiasm around digital innovation and its ability to support both the water and the sanitation economy, and its potential to generate money. I already mentioned the internal monetization of data. That's the ability to optimize the process and improve efficiencies, like optimizing your routing algorithms. But there are also opportunities for external monetization of the data. The water sector generates a lot of data, and there is potential to leverage some of our understandings of customers and their behavior to provide customer insights. What I'm seeing is that people in the Global South are embracing digital technologies to enable them to provide improved and more cost-effective solutions, what you would call elegant solutions. What you're also seeing change quite a bit within our sector is the way in which we view the water cycle. Because we're seeing used water or wastewater as a potential source, we're starting to look at all flows of water within an urban water cycle through a single lens. And we are recognizing that all this water is good water. It's just water of different grades. What this does is when we look to increase our increased water supply, we don't necessarily go to investing in new infrastructure at new sources. So if I have a growing drinking water demand, I would rather invest in demand management and leakage management rather than building a new water source. If I wanted to water my plants or wash my roads, I would rather use my black water or grey water after some treatment rather than investing in a new source. So by having this perspective, we can start to look for efficiency gains from within our water cycle. Critical to this is integrated urban water modeling, and you're seeing a lot of innovations in this space, where people are modeling flows and contaminant fluxes across the urban system. And they're starting to model packets of water as they flow through the system. And these packets have digital signatures that allows them to connect these different grades to different uses. The outcome of this type of approach is that you're seeing cities having a portfolio of options. This is Chennai in India. And it's very similar in principle to what the Singaporeans have done with their 4 national taps. So in Chennai, traditionally they depended on surface and groundwater. But they were one of the first cities in the developing world to invest in desal. They also reuse nearly 10% of their wastewater for industry, which reduces their water footprint. They've invested quite a bit in demand management and rainwater harvesting. Again, they're looking for sources close to where they're generated. And they've also looked at disused quarries, which are natural depressions that contain water, as potential water sources as well. So here you have a city that's always in drought, now diversifying its portfolio of solutions that gives it water security. And it's not only about grey infrastructure. You're seeing a lot of interest in nature-based solutions and landscape adaptation. We're using ecological, hydrological principles, vegetation to filter water as it runs through before it goes into our water bodies, so we protect our water bodies. It's very common to find in the Global South river and lake bank filtration systems, where we use the natural soil to treat our wastewater. And after we've used the water, again in the Global South, it's very common to see wastewater being reused for agriculture, and the use of nature-based solutions for treating that wastewater through constructed wetlands and things like stabilization ponds. And then we can polish that water, again using the soil before it's reused through soil aquifer treatment. These systems require much larger land footprints, but their energy footprints are much lower. So all this path shifting and transitioning is not easy. Water is a system of systems of systems. And when you're dealing with integrated circular thinking, this is complex. To date, our focus has been on the potential of technology to improve efficiency, to generate value from our waste or resourcefulness, and to reduce emissions. However, if we are to make progress, we need to understand and know the readiness of utilities to absorb these new approaches and techniques so they can make the necessary transition. And this is definitely not about technology. Technology readiness has been well established in Europe over the past 10 years. We have a ladder of 9 evolutionary stages, from technology conception to demonstration to full-scale deployment. But as I said, water is special. It's a system of systems, and we're dealing with public health. And so it's important, particularly in the Global South, that we better understand and appreciate societal, organizational, and regulatory readiness as well. Societal readiness asks if the solutions are addressing a real societal need. Has there been effective stakeholder engagement and testing? And finally, are people willing to adopt the solutions, and are they willing to pay for these solutions? Organizational readiness is about the capacity of utilities, their infrastructure, their capability, their skills. Questions around how will they integrate these solutions into their existing processes. This is one of the biggest challenges of moving from centralized to decentralized systems, because the utilities are not sort of designed for that type of thinking. And it also allows us to think about what is the pain to gain ratio for them to make that transition. When we look at the regulatory landscape, utilities can only change if the legislative and regulatory frameworks is ready to allow the uptake of these changes. So legal readiness is crucial and a priority. It can hinder, but it can also be the catalyst that stimulates innovation. Readiness is a complex issue and not homogeneous. For example, if we think about something like energy recovery, we might see high readiness levels across many of these dimensions. But when we start looking at sort of material pathways or things like water reuse, technology readiness might be quite high, but the other dimensions are likely to be quite low due to actual and perceived risks, where culture plays a big role. I feel it's imperative that we use such frameworks to help utilities in the Global South understand and appreciate the challenges of transitioning from 19th century linear systems towards 21st century more circular approaches. Some such frameworks can really help these utilities understand the journey ahead of them. So there's so much happening in the water and sanitation sector in the Global South, and there's so much to do. It looks like money is being invested, but do we have the people to deliver? And this touches upon the first keynote speaker. You see, there is a big shortage of water and sanitation professionals in the Global South, and this severely hampers their ability to meet the current and future water and sanitation needs. So how do we bridge this enormous gap in human resource capacity? At IWA, between 2010 and 2014, we studied 15 low-income countries to better understand their human resources capacity gaps for water and sanitation. And we're actually now in the process of working with WaterAid to update this report. What we found was that there's a lack of data, and that's very poor in terms of human resources and water sanitation service. And without credible evidence to support our case, we will not be in a good position to make a business case which attracts sufficient funding. In the countries we studied, we found that operation and maintenance was chronically neglected because human resources were not being appropriately allocated to that part of the operation. And sanitation services were in particular undermined. When we looked at the training and education of water and sanitation professionals, the picture was equally challenging. The education and skills required to operate and maintain these systems were not being appropriately assessed for the local context. And not to forget that female professionals are underrepresented, particularly in the technical fields. If, as the Chinese proverb says, women hold up half the sky, should women not also be half of the water sector? So we all need to work collectively to see how we can address the human resource deficit and to think about how we can attract more women into this profession. I always finish with this slide. And you know, most of us in the water sector, we know that we can't stay in the business as usual lane. Global change pressures make it that our 19th century systems, the way we thought about our systems, just is not going to work in the new world. In the global north, we tend to be in the middle lane. We have a lot of legacy infrastructure, and we're trying to repurpose them. We're trying to sort of optimize, sub-optimize systems. But in the global south, you really have this window of opportunity to do things differently. They are embarking on a serious journey of creating all this new infrastructure. And they have this opportunity to rethink the way they use water, the way they reuse water, and the way they view water once it's been used in terms of value extraction. They really can make a paradigm shift. And from my perspective, I do travel quite a bit, I see the Global South really making big changes. And I think they will really set the world on fire in terms of how we think about water moving into the 21st century. Thanks very much.